The year is 2009, Final Fantasy XIII just came out for PlayStation, Xboners had to wait until 2010. Rest in pepperonis. Since its initial launch, it's had mixed reviews from a wide perspective of critics that blame the game for subjective and of course objective reasons. Now of course, a game can always be subjectively bad, no matter how good the game is, but today we will focus on the objective points that make Final Fantasy XIII more lackluster. Now, before we even begin this video, I just want to point out, this is a very hard video to make, given that Final Fantasy XIII is probably my favorite video game of all time, definitely my favorite Final Fantasy, so criticizing it is something that I do not enjoy. The reason I'm making this video is because I recently replayed it, and now I'm seeing a lot of Twitter comments bashing the game, and I want to dive in to see if the remarks are reasonable or not. And there most likely are spoilers in this video, so if you have not played 13 yet, I'd advise you to do so. Now, I want to focus this video on 3 different points I objectively believe the game struggles on: game difficulty, lack of exploration, and poor interactions. And I probably would have included story into this, but because that is something that is subjective, I will not include it in this video. I mean, there are people out there who enjoy blue cheese, which, hey, all power to you. You can eat whatever you want. There's nothing I can do about it. But 3 being the least problematic to 1 being the most, so let's start with poor interactions. By interactions, I mean interactions with the world, meaning the lack of vendors, immersion, and communication with other NPCs. I mean, literally, there are no towns where you can stop to buy weapons or potions, even to interact with NPCs to get more in depth with the world. It's non-existent. And I know we get to play in Bodum for a bit, it's actually really nice, and even Nautilus had a lot of people, the place where Saw's nearly offs himself. I said there were spoilers, didn't I? So with that being said, I understand what you guys are saying. I mean, hey cunt, why the hell would I need town vendors? I mean, there's save points that have shops already, I don't need to go anywhere. And I understand, but that's not nearly as immersive as, I don't know, Final Fantasy VII Remake Nibelheim, where it feels much more alive because of the vendors, side missions, minigames, etc. But I put the poor interactions at 3 because I personally don't believe it's that problematic. Sure, it's better if the world feels more developed and packed with life, but it's a game that takes place in a rather apocalyptic setting where the fate of the universe or the world is at stake, so yeah. You can honestly say that about like any Final Fantasy, so yeah. Going to number 2, which is the lack of exploration. Oh boy. Well, for any of you guys who have played this, which should be most of you if you clicked on the video, this game is really linear. It's like when you eat food, there's only one way to insert food. It's by putting it into your mouth, right? Whether that's with your hands, if, you know, for all my curry enjoyers out there, or chopsticks, or a spoon, a fork, whatever you use. Boom, boom, or boom, boom. If you are inserting food into your body or stomach in any other way, I'd consult a doctor, maybe a therapist, maybe God. But besides the point, there aren't any options for you to expand your way of search. It's like a one-way road to the end, and you don't really have free will to do anything else. Now, if we're being honest, the game did come out in 2009, and I know what you guys are gonna say. World of Warcraft came out in 2004, it's open world. Hey Kent, Assassin's Creed 2 came out in 2009, and it's open world. Hey Kent, Mario 64 came out in 1996, and it's open world. But if we were to compare graphics, we'd have a very different conversation, just saying. Still, it doesn't excuse the fact that I have almost no free will in the game in terms of where I want to go next. If you guys want Final Fantasy XIII open world, just play Lightning's Return, that's at least somewhat of an option. Some people do not like guidance and want to figure everything out by themselves without a helping hand. And others don't want to use the brain that God gave them, and I completely understand. Long day of work, really tired, I don't want to think. I get it. But an optimal game that tries to reach all the juicy points should probably have some sort of world that you can indulge yourself in, explore, let yourself decide the journey instead of the game spoon-feeding you. And now, if we're regarding community feedback of the game, this is probably the most controversial point. And there are several dozen community discussions on the internet talking about the linearity. How do you say that? Linearity of the game. I hope I said that right. I mean, look at the layout of chapter 1 of the game. It is literally straight lines, walk to the end, oh okay, let me walk to the other end, okay, let me walk to the other again, and then repeat. Now, to play devil's advocate for like 2 seconds, I do believe that in chapter 11 there is a free roam area called Grand Pulse where you can walk around freely and do a couple side missions. But I'm pretty sure this is just a small segment and everything before and after is pretty much linear. Now, on a personal level, I don't really mind or care. If other things can make up for the lack of exploration, then I guess I have no problems, but for sure this is a huge turnoff for many critics of the game. And now coming into the last thing, the difficulty. Now, I don't want to confuse the combat system and difficulty, they are completely different. The combat system for Final Fantasy XIII is actually made with a lot of thought behind it. There are hundreds of thousands of different ways to assemble your team, when and whom to use different paradigms, and in what order. Out of most Final Fantasy games, I think 13 has one of the most unique systems of battle. The paradigm system is really cool. My real problem falls on the difficulty of the game. It's too damn difficult. And trust me, I love difficult. I love me some Souls games. The fact that you can keep attempting and getting better after each attempt, after each death, it is really cool because you can just see your improvement firsthand right there. But in this game, it isn't. I do not get better in each attempt. It's dying in 3 seconds, wondering if you should keep continuing the game because it's so goddamn difficult, and then trying different paradigms, different characters, different equipment, and hoping you can beat him this time. Look, I'm not the only one who thinks this. Look at how many views these videos have. Barthandelus 2, Sid Reigns. These are videos on how to beat the boss, okay? And look at the comments too. Incredible. For those of you who played Final Fantasy XIII, Barthandelus 2 is probably the most obnoxious boss in the world. I was extremely underleveled and had to farm those abominations outside to get CP. Not like that, the Crystarium points. And even after all that, I had to watch a YouTube video because it was still really hard and I didn't know what paradigms to use and what characters to use, blah, blah, blah. Call me trash? Maybe I am trash. You know, I'll admit it, I'm trash. But I had to, probably past like chapter 10, had to YouTube every single boss because it was getting to a point where I was just annoyed. I was like, dude, I'm not going to keep trying this anymore. I don't have the time for this anymore. So I just YouTubed. And a lot of people did too. And so the $1 million question, does a game's difficulty become a problem when you have to YouTube all the time? Perhaps. And like I mentioned briefly, it isn't a difficulty where you can read the boss's movements and get a better picture. If your paradigm setup is cheeks against the boss, you literally have to change it and figure out how else to do it. Maybe you like certain characters, well, too bad, you're gonna have to use different characters. And I mentioned earlier how there are over 100,000 ways to set up your team formation and paradigms in Final Fantasy XIII, and in a given boss, unless you are completely over leveled, there's like maybe 10 or 12 paradigm setups you can use to beat a boss. Anything else will fall apart and you'll lose. Now, some people like the challenge of having to keep trying new team formations to beat a boss, but this is a process that does become tedious and it takes a lot of time, but I will give credit where credit is due. This game really starts to become difficult around chapter 9 or so. Generally, for a majority of the game, the difficulty is pretty reasonable, but since you don't have all the characters unlocked or together in the first half of the game, you can't really utilize the combat system to its fullest. All in all, there is a difficulty setting, it's just easy and normal, and if you really are struggling or just want to play the game carefree, which side note you won't, because even on easy the game is still really difficult. Now with that being said, I think the game still has some really strong points. It's funny that I said all this, but this is still my favorite Final Fantasy. The other qualities for sure make up for it. I absolutely love the characters and how they change and develop throughout the story. I mean, there isn't a single bad character. And I mean, for the time, these cinematic scenes were more surreal and the game felt more narrative driven than gameplay focused at times, which you can say that about most Final Fantasies if we're being honest. It is unfortunate that Final Fantasy XIII is one of the most polarizing Final Fantasies, community discussions from almost a decade ago criticizing the game to death. That's why I will keep begging Square Enix to do some remake in the near future. There are a ton of Final Fantasies that need treatment, so I don't mind waiting longer. But that about sums it up. Let me know what you guys think about Final Fantasy XIII. Is it a game that you revisit from time to time, or is it a game that you absolutely despise? And if you liked the video, please subscribe. It would mean a whole lot to me, you know me, making these videos and stuff. So with that being said, be good to yourself, be good to others, and drink water. I don't have water on me, but yeah, water. Alright.